Hi guys, welcome to this video. In this video, we analyze this article by Swapan Das Gupta. Swapan Das Gupta is a member of the Bharatiya Janata Party. He's also a member of the Rajya Sabha. He's a nominated member in the Rajya Sabha, right? Nominated by the BJP, right? He has been a leading political figure and is a very well-known author as well. In the 1990s, he was labeled as the chief spokesperson for the BJP, right, when it came to the English media. A very articulate man and someone who writes with a lot of sense, and the same sense is you are going to discover in this article. Even though it's an article which was written on September 22nd 2019, or rather published on September 22nd 2019, it's a good article from the perspective of reading. It's a good article from the perspective of understanding a few things, right? So let's get started. The title of the article is, Will Judiciary Enter the Political Arena? All Eyes on the UK Verdict. What is this UK verdict? We discuss at the end of the article, but to begin with, this article, as the title suggests, it's going to talk about the conflict between judiciary and politics, right? How are the two conflicting with one another? So let's read the article and I'll keep explaining the important pertinent things in the article to you. One of the frequent charges leveled by opponents of the Narendra Modi government is the destruction of institutions. Having won a majority in the Lok Sabha for the second time, the government is being charged with reducing the parliament to a rubber stamp. What is a rubber stamp? Rubber stamp refers to an authority which just approves for the sake of approving without really wielding any power, right? So they are referring to, because the BJP has an absolute majority in the parliament, they are referring to it as a rubber stamp. So it does not really have any power. Whatever the BJP wants to do, it can do, right? It is being accused of manipulating the media to ensure dominance of particular narrative and suppression of awkward questions. So there are two accusations against the BJP. A, it's dominating the parliament. B, it's dominating particular narratives in media, right? And the third accusation is, finally, there are fingers pointing to a supposedly compliant judiciary. That means the judiciary is going by the dictates of the BJP. Remember, these are all allegations that are being made. This is a member of the BJP and he's pointing out the allegations that are being made against the Bharatiya Janata Party in this case, or the BJP government to be precise, the Narendra Modi government. Now he says the first two charges are seasonal. Any air of uncertainty over the passage of a bill, that is when a bill is tabled in the parliament to be passed. So he's saying any air of uncertainty over the passage of a bill in the Rajya Sabha, where the government has to negotiate issue-based majorities. The government is not in an absolute majority in the Rajya Sabha, right? It still needs support of its allies and other parties to pass bills, right? Nullifies the belief that parliament is a showpiece. So basically he's pointing to the fact that since in Rajya Sabha the political party has to be, the government has to work with other political parties, it has to bargain with others. So this means that it is not just a showpiece, right? There is work which is happening in parliament, right? Parliament, they are not being able to manipulate the parliament. Likewise, the government is frequently at odds with the media over the latest piece of outrage, right? However, the situation keeps changing headline to headline. In any case, there is media and there is media. So this line, the way he's written it with a tinge of sarcasm. Basically, he's pointing out the fact that there are divisions in media as well. Some are traditionally supportive of authority, others see themselves in a permanently oppositional role. So there are going to be members in the media which are just going to oppose, right? Their role is to oppose the government. So there are divisions in the media. So the first two charges, he has countered those. He has said that there is discussion and debate in Rajya Sabha. Secondly, as far as the media goes, there are two parts to media as well. There is one which is in opposition of the government as well. It is the final charge of having managed the judiciary that warrants attention. So he has to pay close attention to this. Ever since the Indian Constitution incorporated judicial review, the relationship between the executive and the judiciary has been tense, right? So there are different parts of our democracy. One of those parts is the executive, right? So we've got the legislature, which is the parliament. Then there is the executive. The executive is nothing else, but it refers to the government or the cabinet, right? The operative part of the government, the part of the government which runs the country basically. So they are saying ever since in the Indian Constitution there was judicial review had been incorporated, the relationship between the government and the judiciary has been tense. This was even so at the time of Jawaharlal Nehru, showcased as the model democrat. The very first amendment to the constitution was triggered by Nehru's government's exasperation with the courts for blocking its progressive zamindari legislation. So obviously from this we can infer that Nehru wanted to enact an anti-zamindari legislation. This was blocked by the courts. So what did the government go and do it? It changed the legislation itself. Right, it went back to the parliament and it changed the law itself. So there was, with effect of this, so what happens is if the courts block, right, a particular piece of action, right, a particular amendment, they say this is not allowed by the constitution, you can go back to the parliament and change the law itself. So the moment you do that, what you've done is you've created conflict between the judiciary versus the executive. There is now a conflict at play. The ruling establishment that felt the rarefied judges were wedded to the status quo and unable to appreciate popular sentiment. So rarefied, what does rarefied mean? Rarefied refers to people who are not connected with the masses, right? These are people who are distant from the ordinary class, right? Now, the belief that the judiciary, apart from being independent, is duty-bound to clip the wings of the executive has long enjoyed intellectual sanction. So basically, intellectuals have approved of this. They believe, they think that it is the role of the judiciary to keep the executive in check, right? It can clip its wings. So that means it can edit or it can change what the executive is doing. What has changed in recent times is the parallel that the judiciary is the ultimate authority and the governance has to be conducted by permanently second guessing the judges. So basically the belief which has changed is that now earlier what used to happen was there was this debate between, you had the judiciary versus the executive, both were opposing each other on some occasions. Or see, the way India or our constitution is structured is the judiciary is a check on the executive, but it is not meant to supersede the executive. It is not above the executive. Now what has happened is for far too long the judiciary has been seen as, it has been seen as the last hope or the last bastion of hope, right? And where we see this, that the judiciary is going to save us, right, from the bad decisions of the executive. And this is a thing which is very, very prominent in our intellectuals as well, right? Here when I say the word intellectuals, I am not referring to any particular side of the debate, right? Not taking any sides, just going by the reference in this particular case, right? So what happens in that case is that now judiciary is being, all of a sudden, is not being seen as equal to the executive, but it is being seen as the ultimate authority. And the government has, it is seen as that the government has to go by what the whims and fancies of judges are. With the weakening of the opposition after 2004, that the doctrine is that the judiciary is the final arbiter of politics has also taken root, especially when twined with judicial activism. So it has been coupled with judicial activism. Judicial activism is nothing else, but it refers to the fact that the judiciary has become very active. It on its own, suo moto, right? It takes up a lot of matters for arbitration. It sees that it is in its domain, so it is going to take up a particular matter and decide on it, or it is going to pass directions, right? So this is, there is a lot of judicial activism, right? And the fact that there is a weakened opposition. So judiciary is kind of playing the role of an opposition as well here, opposing the government. The opposition, especially with the parliamentary numbers arranged against it, has been inclined to bank on the judiciary to veto the government. A perusal of India's parliamentary proceedings would reveal the tendency of many opposition MPs, usually lawyers, to reduce political debates to legal proceedings by quoting court judgments. So what have these lawyers done? They are quoting court judgments, right? They are depending upon the judiciary to come and save them. The implicit suggestion is that the legal precedent is somehow sacrosanct, sacred, and the legislature is bound by this. So all these lawyers who are going in to the parliament, remember a lot of our politicians are lawyers, right? So these people, what do? They take judicial arguments with them. They take judicial judgments with them. They quote judgments in their arguments. Remember, you are in a parliament. You have to be the voice of the people. It's not necessary that you have to quote legal judgments, right? So he's just pointing to this phenomena where we are depending a lot upon our judiciary, right? Now he brings in the second part. This is not merely an Indian phenomena. The UK is the home of the principal parliamentary sovereignty, right? So UK is the home of the principle of parliamentary sovereignty. What does sovereignty refer to? Sovereignty refers to the right of, it refers to the ultimate right of a country to govern itself, right, without the interference of others. So when a country governs itself, it's the ultimate right? So without outside interference. So this is what the principle of parliamentary sovereignty is. The parliament is the one which has the right to govern. It is the ultimate or the supreme power in the country, and it is the one which is going to govern the country without outside interference. So you extend this further and relate it to judiciary. Actually speaking, the judiciary should not interfere in the functioning of the parliament. Politics and the rule of law have operated in autonomous spheres. That means they exist independent of each other. There are also conventions governing the relationship between the executive and the parliament, right? The government and the parliament. So you are saying there is a relationship between the judiciary, the executive and parliament, right? So judiciary and executive have a relationship, right? Judiciary and parliament have a relationship. Those relationships should be maintained, right? Or the precedent of how the country should be governed. Now what has happened is the furor over Brexit has, however, created new complications, and there is now a possibility that the courts could enter political arena. Now this is where the reference to time is important. So this event is in the month of September 2019, which took place. What happened was, when Prime Minister Boris Johnson prorogued Parliament for 3 weeks. So this is when you prorogue the Parliament, the British Parliament, that is, you temporarily suspend the functioning of the Parliament. So whatever bills there are, whatever discussions, objections, debates that are going on, all of those are suspended, right? So he did this by exercising his executive privilege. Generally, the parliament is prorogued once a year in UK, right? That is to prepare for the Queen's speech. So she comes before the session ends. It is prorogued for 3, 4, 5 days, 1 week, and the Queen then comes and gives the speech and outlines what the plans of the government are for the coming year. Now this time what Boris Johnson did was, and there was a lot of furor over this, there was a lot of hullabaloo over this, he prorogued the parliament for the reason, he prorogued it for what reason? Because he did not want discussions on Brexit to take place. There was the October 31st deadline for Brexit, and he did not want the discussion to take place on Parliament, so he suspended the Parliament itself. This was not the first time that the Parliament was prorogued for a longer mid-session period, but it was definitely a rare occasion when the executive had lost its parliamentary majority without either the possibility of an alternate government or snap general election. So basically, by suspending the parliament itself, there cannot be another general election, there cannot be a no confidence vote. So you basically suspended it. So Johnson was trying to avoid scrutiny and debate. Inevitably, references were made to the courts, and the result has been 2 conflicting judgments. So basically what happened was, politicians in UK as well, they went to the courts, they went to different courts. What did the court say? The first, by a Scottish court, held that the executive decision was illegal, and the second, by an English court, ruled that it was beyond its competence to pronounce on politics. So the Scottish court took, since UK is, right, it consists of Scotland, it consists of England, etc., etc. Hence, all these court rulings are valid there. The Scottish court said that the executive decision was illegal. The English court, what did it say? That it cannot rule on this. It's a matter of politics. Now it has gone to the Supreme Court, which will deliver its judgment. The judgment is certain to have some bearing on how a parliamentary democracy, and India has modeled itself in a large measure on Westminster. Westminster is where the UK executive, it's a symbol for the UK government, right? Sees the relationship between the executive and the legislature and jurisdiction of the courts, right? So India is based on UK system of parliamentary democracy, right? So whatever happens there, it has implications for our system as well, in the sense that we are modeled on a similar model, right? Now, if the Supreme Court upholds the English verdict, it will be indicting its unwillingness to be a referee on political matters. So if it goes by the verdict of the English court, it will not enter the political sphere. Upholding the Scottish judgment, on the other hand, will temper the doctrine of parliamentary sovereignty. So now what will happen is, all of a sudden, if the Scottish judgment is upheld, then what does the courts do? They enter the domain of parliamentary supremacy, right? Remember, parliament is the supreme power in a democracy, constitutional democracy. By injecting the principles of judicial review, in effect, the Supreme Court will be ruling on its own powers. So what happens is, all of a sudden, what have you made? You've said that the parliament is superseding you are superseding the parliament. The courts are superseding the parliament, and you are injecting the principle that the judicial review can be introduced. So that means that the courts, they can review the order of the parliament, right? So all of a sudden, who becomes supreme in that system? If the courts can review the decisions of the parliament, remember, in a parliamentary democracy, the parliament is meant to be the one which is meant to be laying down all the laws, ruling the country. Now you've said all of a sudden the courts can actually go and change those. These are subject to judicial review. So all of a sudden, courts, they become supreme in nature, right? They elevate themselves one level above the parliament, so they start ruling themselves, right? India, no doubt, sets its own norms of governance, but this verdict will cast its shadow. In Britain too, the issue ultimately centers on trying to find a judicial route to overturn a Brexit sanctioned by expression of popular will. So basically what he's saying in the last line is that what people are trying to do is, politicians are trying to force the judges, or they're taking the matter to court, and they're asking the court to enter the matter of Brexit. Brexit was something which was voted by the people of the country. So the courts, you are trying to make sure that you are trying to find a way, you are trying to basically trying to sneak in a way that courts enter this debate, right? So that is what the article says. Overall, it's a fascinating article, right? Most importantly, it gives you a lot of terms, right? It talks a lot about the judiciary, the parliament, the executive. Your basic task in this case is, and this is how you learn, you should go and research all these terms. You should go and see what the executive is. You should go and see what is parliamentary sovereignty, right? You should go and check up what is the role of an executive, what is the role of the legislature, what is the role of judiciary, how are these interconnected to one another, who should be supreme in a constitutional democracy. These are all terms that you should go and explore. Once you begin to go and explore all these terms, you build your knowledge base. Once you build your knowledge base, you learn more and more about these things, and the next time when you read something like this, you are in a much better position to understand. So that is the skill, that is the takeaway from this video, and that is something that you should take home, right? And this is the kind of analysis that you should do for articles. Remember, you are not going to become political scientists, you are not going to become lawyers, or you are not going to enter the judiciary by reading these articles, but you are just expanding your basic cursory common sense and knowledge for these topics. And that is what your objective should be with reading, that whenever you read, you do not stop at the words itself, you go and research those things. It's not about word meanings, it's about expanding your knowledge, and that is what you should be doing, right? I hope you've learn something valuable through this video, right? This is what the ultimate BARC course is all about, and this is what we offer in Word Pandit, and this is the way you should, this is the Word Pandit way of analyzing articles. And I sincerely hope that you do so with all future articles that you read, right? Thank you very much for watching this video, and happy learning.